So after the we take up the comparison between qualitative and quantitative research, we will now go to a specific qualitative research design, since this is actually the purpose of the course, to focus on the qualitative research design as a research method. So let's take up. There are four major qualitative research methods or research designs that we can take up. We have first phenomenology, and majority of us would have difficulty pronouncing that in one word if you're not familiar. That's phenomenology. The second is ethnography. You might be familiar with this one if you're coming from the social science. The third one is case study. This is very common for business, but you might be oriented in a different manner, especially if you have case study during your undergrad. It will be a different perspective of case study if you use it as a research design. And the last one is grounded theory. I put it in the last part because the course will be focused on grounded theory, because this is more appropriate for business. Although two of these methods, which is case study and grounded theory, can be very effective as a research method for dissertation, but this course is designed to enrich you with knowledge on grounded theory, but maybe a supportive part of the topic would also, a supporting part of that would be taking as uh, consider as case studies one of the method that we can be adopted. And this course will, to give you an advanced information, we can take up both case study and grounded theory, but we will follow the same principles as grounded theory, how we formulated or designed the grounded theory as our research method. So let's start with phenomenology. Let me move myself in the lower part. And I hope that you will not be bored with this one. I want you to laugh from time to time while you're listening to my lecture to avoid being bored. And I hope you're not doing anything. Focus is very important, since you can always retrieve some of the items, very important items, when you listen carefully to the lecture. So we go back to the phenomenology. This is the study of lived experiences. That's bold or highlighted because that's a very important term pertaining to phenomenology of a persons who have involved with the phenomenon being studied and the essence of such experiences. So phenomenology is designed for experience. If you will be confused with what lived experiences, just imagine it is about experience. So the goal of phenomenology is to describe rather than explain or quantify the lived experiences. That means we will not count how many have experienced something like this phenomenon, but our target is to describe that experience. It involves the identification of a common or shared experience of a phenomenon. And this will be presented in a thematic form. That means, although we will also identify the uniqueness of each of the lived experiences of individuals, the purpose of the phenomenology is to gather those shared or common experiences among the individual participants and explain it that this is how they lived, or that's why we call this lived experiences. But to quote Miriam, I'm not sure why there is an extra double quote there, a phenomenological research is well suited for studying affective, emotional, and often intense human experiences. Maybe in our discussion later, you can provide examples of what it is, what type of studies we can employ phenomenology as a research method or design. So a research approach. So can I give example of a study of phenomenology? So we can use phenomenology to study the experience of individuals or business owners who manage their dying business, or the process of how later, but how they lived with the business that is dying or that is going to bankruptcy. The awareness of being going to bankruptcy. So what are the lived experiences? Because it will involve emotional or affective aspects of human experience. So that would be an interesting phenomenology, phenomenological research. Another good example would be for nurses or for those who are on the caring profession. We want to describe, for instance, what's the experience of nurses doing experiences of nurses caring for those who are dying patients. And we have one, I think, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, I've heard that Dr. Mamawag of the College of Nursing is focusing on this type of research. That means she documented the lived experiences of older patients. No? So the best, maybe a good phenomenology, according to, I forgot to put the source, but a good phenomenology would derive in expression after reading your work would be, now I understand what it's like to have experienced that particular phenomenon. That means after reading the work of a phenomenological researcher, you will now imagine how they lived or how they worked or how they experienced those phenomena within their lives. That means maybe if you have felt, that means they communicated their emotions into the writings, that means you are a good phenomenological researcher. Because the purpose of this one is to convince the reader that you don't need to experience such thing in actual terms, but you might, and so that you can understand what's happening to them. No? So that's a good approach for phenomenology. So if you're interested with something, with playing with emotions in relation to business, so you might be interested to use phenomenology as one of your methodologies. The basic question on phenomenology is, what have you experienced in terms of the phenomenon, or what's happening? And the second aspect is that what context of situations have typically influenced or affected your experience of the phenomenon. So we are actually dealing with phenomenon, the social, the environment where you are put in, and the experience. That means our focus here is to identify the individual and the events that's happening, or the phenomenon. No? And that's why you say this, for instance, this is a common, I put the image, it's what's your story, because this is actually phenomenology. If I will talk to you or share to you my story about my experience, we are actually talking about phenomenology. The difference is the difference of sharing it to a friend or someone else is that you are documented and your experience has been compiled along with others who have experienced the same, as a proof that this is really the real experience of someone. So that's the phenomenology method, research design. The second important aspect of qualitative research that needs to be is also related to with the first one is the ethnography. Ethnography is coming from the anthropologies. That means this is a systematic study of the story and culture of a group of people. Although we are considering that the experiences of those in the phenomenology are individual experiences, and they can be considered as a group of people, but the ethnography is strong in culture, and the focus of the analysis is not on the individual, but on the group of people and how they interact with the environment. So it's designed to explore cultural phenomena where the researcher observes society from the point of view of the subjects of the study. Most of the ethnography, if not all ethnographies are actually studying culture in the actual setting. They lived with the participants, or they live with the society or culture to be able to document what's happening. So that's the ethnography. And the new modern ethnography as of now is we call this netnography, or referring to the internet. If you will be joining a certain group of people, or maybe we call this Facebook group, and we want to study how they interact as a group, that means we are studying netnography, but actually that's a new version of ethnography. According to the source that I'm using, which is the PCHRD methods of research, the purpose of ethnography is cultural awareness and sensitivity, but um, it's hard to explicitly say that it's about cultural awareness as of now, because ethnography or ethnography specifically is actually used to study a certain group of people in the virtual environment. That's why we also have another term for ethnography. But basically, these are methods that tend to observe a group of people rather than documenting individual experience compared with phenomenology. And the purpose of this is to provide a holistic approach which examines the complex interrelationship between humans, culture, and their environment in answering your research problem. So that means you will not only limited to the experience of the individual, but how they interact with their environment or the people surrounding them. We don't document the experience of individual ethnography, but we document the experience of the group of people within the environment they are situated. So that's the difference also of the ethnography. So at least you will not be confused on if you will be given a problem, you will know what particular research design I will be probably adopting because of the nature of the research question you want to derive out of that, out of the research question or out of the phenomenon that you want to study. And the third one, which is now, if we accept phenomenology as one of the research methods in business, less of ethnography. If we will apply maybe ethnography in research, in business research, you might be supplementing it in another method, or it can be a supplement to another major methods that you'll be adapting. But case study can stand alone. This is a good method for business because business experiences can be documented into a case study form. So this is a very good potential qualitative, not necessarily qualitative because case study can be in any form, but it can be a good method for a dissertation. So let's go back, let's go to what's a case study. Descriptive but in-depth account of interesting characteristic observed in a group or maybe series of subjects in order to address the research problem investigated. So the unique maybe term here is in-depth account of the characteristic of the observed group or organization. So the subject here do not necessarily have to be a person, unlike in the conditions of the phenomenology and ethnography. In ethnography, is actually we are talking about social being, although here we are also talking about social being, meaning people or the individuals. But in case study, this can be an organization, an institution, or a political units, such as in the government of, example, the province of a certain city or the municipality. So that means we are referring to conceptual terms composed of human being, but we are actually analyzing the institution itself, not the human being. Although the source of data might be the human being, and maybe part of it is the human being, but it can be an institution or a business entity. So unlike in phenomenology, where we focus on individuals or group in a sociology where where we are accounting of the experiences of human beings, case study can be a concept or social construct created by human beings. That means we can study non-existent terms. That means a business entity is not actually is a conceptual, it's a construct created, it's a social construct created by human beings or by law. But in general, we can study its characteristics through case study from the source, not only but human being, but also the documents who created the social construct. Okay, you can clarify terms later if you don't necessarily understand what I'm talking about. Next is selected because of their peculiar characteristics. So meaning you have a target, maybe you have a target hypothesis. It can be here. We can provide actual hypothesis. If you want to study the unique characteristics of an institution or an individual, you can employ case study. For instance, how the National Steel Corporation actually become like what we are now. what happened today, we can provide, you can document it through a case study, or you can study that as a case study that can be used as a lesson learned among other government-owned and controlled corporation. The findings generally lead to hypothesis formulation, but sometimes case study provide a what we call the common one is propositions. Before you start a case study, sometimes you are advised to provide propositions that need to be confirmed or formulated further within your case study. And depending on the design of your case study, it might be you have to formulate a hypothesis after, or you can derive a propositions and later will be refined to hypothesis. So if you have questions on that aspects also between propositions and hypothesis, you can search Google or you can ask me during our live consultation. And lastly, let me move again myself to somewhere else. Next is we have a grounded theory, which is the focus or where this course would be coming from. This is the course is actually designed to focus on grounded theory, both individual participants in grounded theory and the case study as a group. So that means although we are studying grounded theory, we are still employing case study later. So if you will ask the confusion later to me during our live discussion, you can ask me about the entanglement of grounded theory with case study and how we can define our study as grounded at the same time case study. So that's an interesting aspect for me, but it's up for you also to clarify those things to be able to know more about research design using the qualitative approach. Let's go into grounded theory. This is a systematic inquiry in which the researcher derives a general abstract theory of process, action, or interaction grounded in the views of the participants in a study. So there are a lot of, maybe I can summarize three major approaches in studying grounded theory. In fact, I am leaning into one or two approaches only on studying grounded theory. I'm not using the other one because I'm not really convinced of that approach in studying grounded theory. So maybe the main purpose why I was teaching grounded theory with you is that it's because of my experience and where we base our grounded theory process during my dissertation. Let's move on. The objective of the grounded theory is to develop a new theory about a phenomenon that is grounded on data collected from the study subjects. That means it's possible for a grounded theory to formulate something out of the data from the participants rather than reading the literature. A majority of the research method, particularly the quantitative use, is used in general use deductive method. That means we will derive terms or construct in general to be able to derive a certain hypothesis. But in grounded theory, it's not. We are studying the data, the participants, and derive a hypothesis out of this data. So it is grounded theory or qualitative research in general requires you to think, make sense of what your data is all about rather than reading the literature. So that means, and that's why I'm saying also that qualitative research focus on the new generation of ideas, new ideas, and interpreting something that would make our readers interesting to provide them a new perspective. Lastly, I will say the last item here, distinct character of the grounded theory is that data collection and analysis are interrelated and iterative. That means with analysis beginning as soon as the first data are collected and shaping further data collection. That means this is among the method of the qualitative method. I mean, grounded theory is unique because you are doing the analysis while collecting data. So meaning you are already analyzing the data while you are still collecting it. I compared with the other methods where we collect all the data, compile it, and analyze it. Here it's not. We collect the data, analyze it, and collect again the data to confirm our understanding of the previous participants until we can derive something like a new theory or hypothesis or propositions out or a framework out of the data that we are collecting. So What is interesting about grounded theory is that it will be the focus of the course, and you'll be forced to think of or make sense of the data. We can collect maybe the same data, but we can have various interpretation out of it depending on the perspective that you are looking. We call this core categories in grounded theory, and I will discuss that later maybe.